this auto-active. There we go. Are you guys okay if I don't go to the pupitre? I prefer to stay seated. We're like having a conversation, I think. I'd first of all like to thank the Cultural Services of the French Embassy here in New York, and also the Lycée Français for welcoming me to this conference. And also really have to say thank you very much to the Cultural Services of the French Embassy and the French Consulate General in New Orleans for all of the support that they give to our efforts in Louisiana. As it was said, I'm the director of the Council for the Development of French in Louisiana, which is, as I am aware, the only state agency of its kind in the United States. It was created by Legislative Act 1968 to represent and to meet the cultural and educational needs of all of Louisiana's French language populations. What I have to do, first of all, to give you an idea about Louisiana and to situate you is that Louisiana represents a mosaic of the French-speaking world. Was first settled in 1699 by French colonists coming primarily from Canada. We had huge immigrations of people that were brought in from Africa as slaves. There were people who came in from Saint-Domingue after the Revolution, about 10,000 of them. The Acadians arrived from the Maritimes of Canada in the late 18th century. We've had successive waves of French language immigrations into the state, and they have been numbered at about 18 different groups. So it's very difficult to imagine that Louisiana and Louisiana's French-speaking and Creole-speaking populations are homogenous. That gives us a great linguistic and cultural heritage richness and diversity, but it also represents quite a number of challenges for us, because as a state agency, we're trying to respond to the different needs of all these different groups of people, which aren't necessarily the same because they represent very different linguistic backgrounds, racial backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, and trying to pull all of these different groups of people together is sometimes difficult. Codefil was reformed actually by legislative act last year, and it's important for you to understand how that came about and what that effort was meant to do. The council was previously composed of 50 different people, all of them named by the governor, none of them necessarily having any kind of thing to do with French in Louisiana, that sort of thing. And in the new legislation, the number of councilors was reduced from 50 to 23, making it much more manageable. But also, each of those people who comes to the council is representing a different organization or group in Louisiana that is a French language group or has some sort of interest in the French language. We have a representative, as you can imagine, from the United Houma Nation, which is a francophone Native American group in Louisiana. That sort of goes way beyond the comprehension or perception of people. How could that be? And Janie will talk about that a little bit later. Codefil in its new legislation has two very distinct roles that we're called to play. One of them is educational, and the other is in the realm of socio-cultural economic development, and with a very specific kind of target to tourism, because Louisiana, for many French-speaking people around the world, is sort of an Atlantis. We're sort of seen as the lost tribe of Israel. When people come from France or from Canada, they discover that in Louisiana there are these people who speak French. And just a personal anecdote, it was one time with a very hardened journalist from Paris who, you know, we can understand what that person might represent or be like. And in this very haphazard encounter with an older Louisiana lady, probably in her 70s or 80s, this guy completely melted, had tears in his eyes, and he said, hearing her speak for the very first time in 20 years, I've heard the voice of my grandmother. So it's that visceral for people from the French-speaking world when they come to Louisiana. So in these new mandates, one of the things that we are very much called to do is the development of immersion, French immersion in our schools, and also, like I said, in the area of socio-cultural economic development. One of the things that we're really looking at is how do we position this? How do we position the French language? Because what you have to understand is that as of 1921, with the new state constitution, French was deinstitutionalized and de-officialized in Louisiana. So 90 years ago, we lost this capacity to be educated in French. We lost this capacity to go to the court in French. We lost all of these things that really gave us French as a living social language. Even though that still does exist in quite a number of small communities in Louisiana where you can go to the post office in French, or you can go to the grocery store in French, or to the mechanic in French. That does still exist in some places, but this de-officialization and de-institutionalization of French created 2 or 3 generations of people who became very stigmatized for the fact that they spoke French. When they went to school, they had to learn English because that was the new official language of Louisiana. And so they didn't transmit French to their children. So with the creation of Codefil in 1968, one of the ideas was that the schools took French away from Louisiana. By putting French back into the schools, we could reignite the French language in Louisiana. We could redémarrer la machine. But one of the things that we haven't really done is develop things outside of the classroom. I really liked the Swiss cheese analogy a little while ago because I, in Louisiana, use very often the analogy of coastal erosion. And we have that great land loss in Louisiana, which is caused by the alluvial material in the river being funneled off the end of the continental shelf out into the Gulf of Mexico. And because there's no annual spring floods, the marshes aren't being rebuilt, so we get this coastal erosion. We have this French erosion in Louisiana, we could say also, thank you, because we've really canalized all of our efforts into the classrooms and not into the social spheres. And I'd really like to thank Joy for her presentation earlier. I was jumping in my seat because it completely validated this idea that I have and that I'm trying to forward to my Council of Administration and also to other people in Louisiana, where we have to have these abilities and these efforts outside the classroom, where French is useful, where French is visible, where French is audible, where it is an actual living language. I would like to challenge all of you in the academic sphere here today, because I'm not an academic. I actually come from the social, cultural, economic development world, where I'm looking at culture as a product and how to position it. And one of the things that we need to do, even in Louisiana, is come up with ways in which French is not just a subject matter, where French is really something that is a tool or an avenue to jobs. And I was really stricken a couple of weeks ago. We had a great event in Louisiana called the Grand Réveil Acadien, where we had people coming down from the Maritimes of Canada, and University of Moncton was there, University of St. Anne from Nova Scotia, the Société Nationale de l'Acadie, and they had these phenomenal banners behind us that were in French and these promotional things for their programs. And it struck me, in none of our educational or none of our French departments in our universities in Louisiana can you create something like that. We can dissect Flaubert, we can do all of this critical thinking, but we need to create, and we need to come up with ways in which, from the academic perspective, we're giving this vitality, this usefulness to French. I was also stricken by the statistic in France, and this goes right along with the things that we're seeing in the States and in Louisiana also, where the parents and the children are choosing English. Why are they choosing English? Because they think that English is an avenue to something. They see that English is a useful tool. And that's the same thing that's happening in the States with Spanish, because the parents and the teachers and the administrations are all seeing that Spanish is useful. So how do we position French as a useful tool for our children? If we're doing immersion and we're teaching French in our schools, to what end are we doing that? And that's one of the great big questions that we're now looking at in Louisiana. How do we federate people, all of these different groups, who should have the French language as their common thread, their common link, also keeping in mind all these different groups of people, these different backgrounds? And how do we create a French language identity in Louisiana apart from, or going beyond, a Creole identity, or a Houma identity, or a Creole of color identity, or a Cajun identity, and the list goes on and on and on, because we tend to continue to see ourselves within those 18th and 19th century definitions of who we are. And those definitions get reprojected back onto us. And I'd like to leave you with this because I think it's a pretty funny thing. people in Louisiana are francophone in the very same way that people in Belgium or Mali or Haiti or anywhere else in the French-speaking world can be. And it very often happens that there'll be a group of us somewhere sitting around talking, and there is a French person or someone from elsewhere who says, "Ah, mais vous parlez très bien français. You speak very good French." And at first, my reaction was, "Oh, well, thank you very much." And then after that, I thought, well, you know, I'm just as francophone as you are, with sometimes a different accent, with sometimes different words. And so a lot of us developed this automatic response, which really puts people back sometimes in a different reflection. So now when we get, "Vous parlez très bien français," we always say, "Et vous aussi." So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Joseph, and thank you for pointing out the extreme diversity that's the Francophone community within Louisiana and outside of Louisiana. I think this amazing panel here really represents that very well. We have people from all over. And just one remark, interesting here, you have Francophones who've been around in the US for many, many decades or centuries, represented here, and you also have represented the immigrant communities with Asnath and Madame C. So this could help you be proactive as you're listening to the panel, to know that some of the populations are recently immigrated, and some have been here for centuries in Maine or New England and Louisiana. I will now hand the mic to Asnath Fleuriot, the head of education at the Haitian American in Action. Thank you very much, Asnath.
Thank you, David. I'm happy to be here. Let me start by thanking Monsieur Le Devedec for having me, le lycée français, FIS, and the French Heritage Language Program. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm here on behalf of Haitian American in Action. Haitian Americans in Action is a non-profit organization that we have in Brooklyn. The goal of our organization is to empower the Haitian community in the United States and in Haiti. We try to help them to grow socially and intellectually. And I'm proud to say that the president of our association is here with us, Monsieur Fleuriot. And we also have Madame Pascale Descouberte, ou Mademoiselle Descouberte. Elle est aussi la directrice, la sous-directrice du programme. Now, Pascal and Delarky tried to be here because they understand that it's important, the conference that we have in here today, to talk about the importance of French, of keeping our French heritage. Now, the problem that we have in our community, in the Haitian community, starts from back home, and I can go to many years back after slavery, where some educated people speak French and could speak it fluently, and others could not speak. They speak Creole or the African dialect or what have you. Now, the separation was made right there after we got our independence. People start to distinguish themselves, and they start thinking that they belong to a different class if they speak French and they could speak it fluently. That means they were free much more longer than slaves who recently have gotten their freedom. And that has helped them. It has given them status in a way that, because all of our public functions, government and school and everything in Haiti is done mostly in French, people who could only speak Creole did not have a say in what is taking place in the country. And the problem, to this date, we still have the problem. We now have, since 1987, Creole became an official language. It was French for a long time. So now we have two official languages. We have Creole and we have French. However, instruction in the school is mostly made in French. Now, mind you, so many kids are learning in French, but when they go home, they only speak Creole with their parents because not everyone or not every member of their family had a chance to go to school or to learn the language properly. Because if you do not go to school, you cannot speak French because it's only taught in school. It's really formal. Even the middle class people who speak French fluently, who've been in school, they choose to speak Creole at home because they're much comfortable speaking Creole at home or in informal gatherings. That's the reason why for many of us Haitians, speaking casual French or meaning French in informal occasions is kind of a little bit complex, difficult, because we know French as being official when we're doing official things, when we're in school or in a public function, you know, doing things that are more serious than joking, telling jokes, or, you know, hanging out with a friend or going out to eat, things like that. So because of that, kids who do learn the language in school have a problem to speak it fluently, because once they get home, they are involved in other activities that involve, you know, much more like Creole most of the time. So we have a language that we can read and learn very well, but when it comes to speaking it, we speak it to a certain extent. And Creole, it's the language that we are much comfortable speaking, but we don't know how to write it or how to read it. So that gives a problem. We speak a language and we write and read in a different language. So because of that, our Haitian students, when they come here as ESL students, they have a problem that so many other students don't have. And as an educator, I deal with that, and I've been dealing with this in the public school system in America for 13 years. Our students, you know, are well educated, they know math, they know science, even though they don't know the English language yet, but they can still perform well in school. However, they have poor performance because of the language barrier that exists. Now, we have asked Department of Health to translate the exams for our kids. So we do now have the exams in Creole. They refuse to write it for us in French because they believe that we are not francophone. We are creolophone. Being creolophone, you are entitled to Creole tests. Now, I have my students taking tests in Creole, and they cannot read it. So they do not understand. And I try to help them. I can't, because I also don't read Creole the way I should. Now, it's a problem. It's written in Creole, and I'm trying to translate to French while the test is written in Creole. So our organization tried to implement the French program in the community because we believe that will give our kids their confidence, because speaking a language has always been a problem for them. So learning to speak English causes a problem as well, because they don't know how to express themselves in a foreign language fluently. And it helps them to do better in school, because now that they know French, they can speak it, they can read it well, they can write it. So when they have to learn English to, you know, perform in school, it's easier for them. So I have to say, with the help of David, whom I'm so happy to see today, and the help of the French Heritage Language Program and FACE, we are able to put 5 different programs in the community, mostly in the churches, where every Sunday the kids are exposed to the French language, they are taught by qualified teachers for 2 hours, and they are doing very well. This is only our second semester. The community embraces the program, and we want to be able to continue the program because we believe that will have a great impact on our school children, a great impact on our community, and that will help the government in Haiti to do better, to reform the educational system that we have in Haiti, because we do suffer from it here. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, Asnath, and I also want to thank my friend Fleuriot for being with us. I'm sure we will hear interesting and matching comments from Madame C about the struggle of immigrant children to keep their language alive. And in the case of French, what's interesting is that it's often more than French. It's always French and, or I should say, a language and French. So that makes things always a little more challenging. I will hand the mic to Julia. Thank you so much for being with us. You will go to the podium? Okay. Thank you.
Merci, David. I like to talk with my hands, so I have to have my hands free. First of all, I'm so happy to be here, and I'd like to thank the conference organizers for putting this together and for inviting me. It's really a pleasure to be here. So the question I was trying to answer is, what are the realities today for Francophone cultural heritage in Maine? And I have to stress try, because first of all, it's a very long story. The presence of French presence in Maine goes back to 1604 with a short-lived settlement in the St. Croix River on St. Croix Island. Secondly, I have no French cultural background myself, no French ancestry. And thirdly, I'm not sure that any one person in Maine could represent French cultural heritage in Maine. It's a very, very complex issue, and I think if you were to ask this question of 10 people, you'd probably get 15 different answers. So with all that said, I'm going to try to give you some overview, including some history and some contemporary trends. And I do have a map of Maine. That could go up anytime if you have it there, or maybe I should be pushing the right button. But if you look at the situation for French cultural heritage now, there are some positive trends and some things that may be a little not so positive. On the positive side, we have our geography. We're surrounded on two sides by French speakers in Quebec and in New Brunswick. We have a new governor as of last November. Merci, Benoit. Paul Lepage, who is a first language speaker of French from Lewiston, and he used French in his campaign for governor. You know, literally, votez Lepage. I mean, that was really part of his campaign. If you look at the census figures on ancestry, there's actually a little uptick from 2010. We can see that people are responding. 24.9% of respondents in 2010 said they had French or French-Canadian ancestry, whereas in 2000 it was 22.8. So we're up a couple of percentage points on that question. French study in public schools in Maine is holding its own against Spanish. There are 177 Maine K-12 public schools offering French now, and there are 173 in Spanish, so we feel kind of good about that. But I just returned from an endangered language conference in Wisconsin, and I really feel that French in Maine is an endangered language. The variants of French that are spoken today in Maine are in danger. The fluent speakers, first language French speakers, are all mostly over 55. So some of us are very concerned about that. French is not heard in public very much, and in terms of the surveys of children at publicly funded schools who say that they speak a language other than English at home, French just dropped from 3rd position to 4th after Arabic. This is April 2001 versus April 2006. Maine is becoming much more diverse. There's something like 103 languages identified by kids as their first language other than English. In the first position is Somali, so these are not French-speaking immigrants for the most part. Second, Spanish, so now it's Arabic and French in fourth place. But I think you have to look beyond these kinds of figures to know more about the reality on the ground, and I hope you can see this map. I found this on a very interesting website which is maintained by the Franco-American Center at the University of Maine, Orono. It's francomaine.org, and there are lots of maps, there's a lot of information. And this shows the concentrations of French cultural heritage in roughly two large groupings. So the first up in northern Maine, in the upper St. John River Valley, are the descendants of the Acadian refugees who were expelled by the British in 1755. And, oh, that's great, yeah, merci. And then, so that's that northern area. And of course, that border was drawn across that community. So there are French speakers on both sides and their family ties and so on. And French is, well, actually Kate Harrington is here and she's taught in that area, and she can fill in anything I've left out. But really, French is strong there. You can go to McDonald's and hear French in some of those towns. Whereas in the southern Maine towns, central and southern, which are traditional mill towns, these are the cities where French-Canadian immigrants came to work. And about 1 million people left Quebec between 1830 and 1930 to work in these textile mills. And because of geographical isolation and also choice, mostly the choice of the Catholic Church, I'd have to say, the language survived for many, many years in both of these regions. In the Petit Canada of the mill towns, people went to school in French with their, in the Catholic schools. Their parents worked in the mills. They used French on the factory floor. They used French in the local shops until probably the 50s and 60s. What you have after that is dramatic language decline. And part of that is related to language policy. There was a law enacted in 1919 that outlawed the use of French in school. Kids were punished for using French. You had a very active Ku Klux Klan movement against the French in Maine in the 20s, also against the Italians, and a lot of discrimination in overt and covert ways. Even today, many French speakers will say, I don't really speak French, or they'll say, I speak the wrong French. They've been made to feel ashamed that their accent isn't correct. So the result of that is that the French population went underground, to use Yvon Labbé's phrase. And there's just this whole hidden French experience in Maine. And what I found is that you hear the names, you see them on the businesses. Sometimes if you probe a little bit, you'll find a lot of passive speakers. And my direct experience is in the idea of French reacquisition. So that is to open up to a generation of people who heard French as children and build on the idea that we're getting from recent brain research that the language that is experienced in a child forms a kind of brain map. And if that's true, if there's a kind of physical location for French in the brain, then French can't really be entirely lost. So we've worked on methods and approaches to, and it's not exactly heritage language teaching, and it's not exactly foreign language teaching. It's something quite different, but we borrow from those disciplines, to try to find a way to trigger the French that's in a person's brain. And it's been a very, very interesting experience. And I've been part of a group in Waterville, but I've also talked to many, many people in other French communities. And sometimes they'll say something like, well, getting my French back was like finding an old friend I hadn't seen in a long time. It's a very individual process, and I'm glad to talk about it in another setting if we have time. actually, in the last few years, there are a lot of signs of initiatives and people coming together to say, yes, we're proud to be French. There's a new conversational group called Les Bavards in Waterville, in a cafe on the main street, where people are standing up saying, yes, we speak French in public, and we sing in public in French if we want to, and anybody's invited to attend. And I think what I'll offer to do is, I have notes about a whole variety of initiatives and things going back to the 70s, institutions, groups, individual ideas. And if anyone's interested, I'd be happy to email you that whole list, because I think it's just, I don't have time to go into everything. So I do sense a kind of renaissance, a sort of interest in French revitalization, and I'm very excited about the Maine French Heritage Language Program. I think this, in a way for me, as someone who's been working in French communities for 30 years, is kind of like a dream come true. It's also a huge responsibility, and we know that starting a French heritage language program in Maine won't necessarily cure all the problems. It won't necessarily reverse the decline in the use of French, but I think I really have hopes that it will attract a lot of attention, and people will begin to see the value of French. They'll begin to appreciate their culture and their heritage more. I know the children will. And I think they'll begin to see that their language is part of a big francophone world. And maybe they'll have the kind of response that Joseph was saying, you know, I speak French and so do you, and we're equal in this French-speaking world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Julia. Is this working? Yes. I think it's easy to see the implications in terms of integration at the scale of a community or at the scale of a community in the country from what we've heard already. Would you like to start? Are you using the podium, or Janie Lasserre from the Council of the Houma Nation?
Good morning, and I'd like to thank everyone for inviting me here. I'm replacing Jamie Billiard that sits on the Cloverfield Board of Louisiana, and I sit on the United Houma Nation Tribal Council representing my district, district number 3, which is Lower Dulac and Lower Bay du Large and the community of Grand Caillou. We are the largest state-recognized tribe in Louisiana. We have over 17,000 tribal members. And we did a survey not too long ago. And out of that survey, we found out that 40%, over 40% of our tribal people still speak French. And we, as a people, see the problem that we are losing our French. Even though over 40%, we see the problem. So we try to address that before it becomes a major problem to our community. I myself grew up speaking French. I had never heard English before until we finally were able to go to school. And, you know, our people were not allowed into this public school system till the 1964 when integration happened for the other communities, the black people. They had black schools, they had white schools, but they didn't have Indian schools. So my parents, my grandparents never got any kind of education. And of course, you know, we did have a native tongue. We somewhat lost that. We only have a few of the words that remain today. We're trying to also work on that, but the language that we speak, as we call it, is la langue Houma, and it's the French language. And again, I had read one of the bios in the program today when we got it over the emails. I wish we had had someone like Marie Michel to encourage our parents to say it's okay to continue to speak your language. We didn't have that. We were discouraged, you know. I look back when one of the elders that was interviewed in the late 90s, Father Rock Nake, he himself said that he was punished, you know, every time at school he was punished, to speak French. That was really hard. It was, something that was hard for a child to understand. You could speak French at home and it was all okay, but you got to school, you were punished. So something must have been wrong with this language. So like I say, and then on the other hand, the parents wanted us to learn English because they knew it was going to better us. One of the things that without the education that we lost was our lands, because like my parents and grandparents, a lot of times, the oil industry came into the community and they were asked they weren't being told they were selling their land. They were signing papers and they were under the impression they were leasing the land, but indeed it was being sold. So like I say, they knew that we had to learn the English language. And it was hard for me, and I still say today, I still think in French and speak English, but my thought process is in French. And I realized a long time ago, when I first got married, back in 1974, we moved to the Bahamas. And I had no one, childhood, I was surrounded by my family, my aunts and uncles living all around me, speaking French, and all of a sudden, I moved out of this country to the Bahamas, and I had no one to speak French. My husband, I married someone from Tennessee, did not speak French, although I did teach him. He knows the foods very good. That was one of the first things that he learned. But in the Bahamas, everyone spoke English. And then finally one day, and I had my husband's young son living with us, and he would spill things on the carpet, and I said, we have to get these carpets clean, before they get too soiled. And so made arrangements, and someone comes in. I hear a knock at the door, and so I open the door, and he says, "Bonjour." Oh my God, those words were so, so close to my heart, and then come to find out, that was and he was from Haiti. So there was a connection there. But like I say, it's been very hard. We have a whole generation that lost the French language, a whole generation. And we see the problem now. And sometimes, the Indian people, especially the Houma people, were left out of so many things. Even Wednesday night, attended a meeting for our coastal restoration. And all we were asking was for a seat at that table. And here, and we had to struggle to finally get that. I think we're getting that. But here, we are invited to be right here. I'm representing my people, and this is so, and the French are going to come in and build a school for us. And so, we have to do on our part, we meet every so often. Mr. Michael Dordor wrote this book, Point of Whiskey. We meet every 2 weeks or so. We go through this book. It's written in English. We interpret it. We say the words in our French. And this is what we're going to use. It's a little history book. It's about the culture. It's about the daily life of our Houma people. And this is what we're going to be using to teach our young children the French language. And, I've heard so many things that I can relate to over here. But, it's going to be very hard, but we have to be the one to initiate it. We can't let, another day go by that we see our people not speaking French. So I think my time's just about up. And thank y'all.
Thank you very much, Janie. Thank you very much. We see that languages are a lot about emotions as well. I think there is a lot of emotions involved when it comes to your culture and your language and how to make it survive or how to keep it up. I will now let Mrs. C, Assetou C, the head of the Centre Culturel Malien, which is located here in the Bronx, speak. Thank you.
Merci, David. C'est un grand honneur et un privilège de m'adresser à vous. Permettez-moi d'abord de remercier French Heritage Langage Programme ainsi que tous les autres qui ont permis la tenue de cette rencontre. Le français a toujours été une langue utile de communication et de coopération. Aujourd'hui encore, elle est devenue plus importante. C'est une raison qui m'a poussé à créer dans le Centre culturel Lobo Traoré, Centre culturel Malien Lobo Traoré, dont je suis la directrice des cours de français. Ces cours ont permis à des jeunes Africains nés ici en Amérique d'apprendre la langue officielle de leur pays d'origine. Évidemment, ceci ne peut être qu'un avantage, car cela favorise non seulement la facilitation de leur entrée, dans les systèmes politiques, économiques et sociaux dans le pays de leurs parents, mais une meilleure intégration dans la culture de ces pays. Le programme French Heritage nous appuie dans ce travail de formation au grand bonheur des parents qui ont vu leurs enfants commencer à parler le français et s'imprégner des réalités culturelles à leur pays. Notre programme d'enseignement est linguistique et culturel à la fois, car la culture est d'une importance capitale, surtout pour les enfants nés à l'étranger. Il est vrai que le programme Héritage, comme nous l'avons dit, plus haut, nous soutient, mais les défis sont encore la financière et logistique. Il faut dire que ces enfants qui viennent apprendre le français au centre sont tous des enfants d'immigrés, donc venus de familles aux ressources très limitées, où le papa ou la maman peinent à joindre les deux bouts. La décision récente prise par le programme French Heritage de demander aux parents une contribution mensuelle n'a pas été bien accueillie par les parents qui disent être reconnaissants au programme French Heritage, mais qui disent aussi que leur maigre revenu pour la suivi de leur famille a été menacé par la crise économique et demandent au programme French Heritage de faire preuve de plus de compréhension à leur égard. Cependant, moi, en tant que directrice du centre, j'ai multiplié des appels et des contacts pour trouver d'autres sources de financement et faciliter ainsi notre collaboration avec le French Heritage Programme. Aujourd'hui, je suis satisfaite par les dépenses du centre par mes propres moyens, aidés par mon mari, M. Si, et ma fille, Amici. Mais je ne saurais terminer sans reconnaître les grands efforts faits par French Heritage Langage Programme pour nos enfants. Nous sommes tous très heureux et souhaitons longue vie au programme French Heritage. Je salue au passage l'actuel directeur du programme, Benoît Le Devedec, et son précédent, David Lasserre, de même que M. K, qui enseigne les cours au centre tous les week-ends. Mesdames, Messieurs, chers élèves, chers enfants d'élèves, Je vous remercie de votre attention.
Thank you very much, Assetou. I think we all see that maintaining your language, from what we hear from all our panelists, is a struggle, and it is a task, as Antonin Baudry was saying after Derrida. It is a task to maintain it. And what we see is a state getting involved in Louisiana, and what we see elsewhere is maybe more unclear. And it has to come from individuals or groups, communities, organizations. And so I think it's really impressive and interesting and intense to have you all here and to share your experiences and what you do. And it really shows the diversity of what's happening on the ground. I would like to now take questions. I'm sure you have many. Yes, already one here. Thank you.
So I just wanted to make 2 points, and one is the question. When you mentioned the issue of speaking a certain French and not another one, so there's been interesting initiatives like in Louisiana there's been a publication of Le Dictionnaire des Français de Louisiane. I had the great pleasure to be in Louisiana last year for the Congress of French Linguists. And I just wanted to go back to some of the issues that we heard about earlier to bring some of what you said here. And this also links with Haiti and Mali, etc. Given that maintaining a language is not only the job of educators, but we saw with the talks of Ana Roca, it's also the importance of the media. I think that we cannot forget the role of that. I mean, French publishing has worked very differently from what has happened in the States and in the UK, as far as I know. So in the UK, Penguin publishes happily Ben Okri in Nigerian English, okay? And British people as well as Americans have access to this literature, okay? I know much better the case of Haitian literature than I know the case of French literature produced in Africa, so I'm going to speak to that. When Yannick Claens is published by a French publisher, she writes in Parisian French. When Jacques Houma writes in this amazing French Haitian, he doesn't get published in France and he's not very well known, etc. So I think there is also a responsibility of the media and the whole policy of francophony around this, and French-Canadian writers, I mean, Canadian publishers don't publish in France and vice versa. So there is also this thing about not letting other French speakers own French. I mean, I worked with Zairian French for many years and Zairian French speakers, and their French was different from mine, but it doesn't mean it's worse or better. And so I think that there has been this very different policy at an international level. The second point I want to make is, please, Haitian communities, do not make your 3 languages that you can have here a problem. It's not a problem, it's an issue. I work with the Jewish community. They have been incredibly good at maintaining a diaspora language, be it Yiddish, for instance, maintaining Hebrew and also speaking English. It is not a problem when you put in the resources, okay? And my second point is that we should also look, when we have these debates, we could learn a lot from the case of the fall of the Soviet Union. After the fall of the Soviet bloc, Latvia was very successful at imposing Latvian again in schools, along Russian sometimes or not, whereas with Kyrgyz it's much more difficult, and we should learn lessons from this. So 3 languages is not impossible, and would send an important message to Haiti. Okay, I just wanted to say that. Okay.
I'd like to respond from the Louisiana perspective. The fact that French was not the language of instruction in schools since 1921 has made that I would just pull out of the air the statistic that 99% of Louisiana French speakers are not literate in French. So that means that there is no consumer market for French language publication. Without a consumer market for French language publication, it cannot exist. I would like to, however, point out that the Centenary College in Shreveport has probably one of the most dynamic French programs in Louisiana, and they are actually republishing lots of Louisiana literature that was done in French in the 18th, 19th, and early 20th centuries. Interesting enough, this is Les Sonnelles, which was done by Armand Lanus in the 1830s. This is a literary movement led by Afro-Creoles in New Orleans in French that predates the Harlem Renaissance by nearly 100 years. So French language literature exists in Louisiana. They're also at Centenary taking new francophone authors in Louisiana, because people are starting now to find their voices in French and reacquiring written French. And I'll also point out that we're in the process now with our immersion schools. We have 30 of them across the state. Our challenge there is that depending on the school district, they only go through 6th or 8th grade, but we are now producing for the first time in 100 years Louisianians who are literate in French. There is a generational gap there, though. And this is creating some issues because we'll say the under 45 crowd who has access globally to French as a written language, to French as a language of global communication, that sometimes scares the older generation because they didn't have that access and they don't understand the politics of language. And I would like to point out earlier that one of the panelists was speaking about this political movement of language. There is no current political movement based around language in Louisiana, in the same way that you would have it, say, in the Maritimes of Canada or in Quebec. The concept of language as a political tool doesn't really resonate yet, but it's beginning to. There were actually debates in the Louisiana legislature last year, and I would encourage you to go look at it on YouTube, where French language elected officials in Louisiana are debating in French the redistricting of Louisiana. So this concept is beginning to develop itself, but we're working on so many different fronts, and the reintroduction of a language has to happen on all of those different levels, the educational level, the societal level, the political level, and we're beginning to see a great convergence of all of those different things.
All right, thank you. I believe that you made a valid point. We should therefore be able to speak all 4 languages that are making their way now in Haiti, because since that we have the presence of the United Nations there, everyone in Haiti is trying to speak English as well. So now we have Creole, French, English, and Spanish, because Santo Domingo is next door. Now, it's important that kids speak so many, people speak as many languages as possible. However, our objective is to have it done properly. If we're going to speak French, let us read it, write it, and speak it fluently. And same thing for Creole, and same thing for English. And when I say fluently, I'm not talking about accent, because you may always have an accent in a language, but the idea is whether or not you can convey a message. And since after the earthquake that occurred in Haiti, we have so many Haitian kids coming here to the United States. And it's funny how you mentioned earlier how in school the problem exists and it's strong. For our bilingual classes or ESL classes, we do have bilingual teachers for Spanish. We do have ESL print or literature or, classroom materials for kids to use here in the United States. But in terms of French, our French kids have nothing there for them. Now, that is the reason why now in the Bronx, where I work with so many African kids who are francophone, and when they come to the school, they cannot perform well because the ESL department cannot help them. The resources are not there. They are not available in French. So now we're trying the French program there. I'm the only French teacher there. I believe that they should have many more. And we're trying to help those, and those kids are ashamed to speak French. They do not want to relate to French, and that is happening now. Same thing, you know, same thing for our Haitian kids. Now, what we would like to do is helping those kids to be proud of their heritage, to practice the language, and let them know that they can also take tests in French, like the AP tests that we're trying to put in place, the French Regents test, so that they can know that it doesn't stay right here. They can continue in college. I can testify for that. I was a pre-med student, and the science courses were hard, but that's what I want, because every Haitian wants to be a doctor, an engineer, and so forth. No one wants to be a teacher. But when I got there, I said, I'll take French classes for easy A's. And I realized that by taking French classes, I had enough classes to graduate with a degree in French. And I said, forget about bio, and I graduated in French literature. So this is to say that and there are not many French teachers out there in our community or even in the African community to help our kids who are coming from home. So like you mentioned, we need to be conscious about the problem, work on it, and try to do it and do it right. Thank you.
With my people, same thing I can relate to you. I did the 4 years of French in high school, and and same thing with my brother, that was one of his majors, but we did not consider French a foreign language. That was what we heard every day. That's what we spoke every day. It wasn't foreign to us, so, but then like you say, I aced that. And most of my people, like I say, we speak the French, but, being lagging in school and everything, like with my parents and grandparents, we never learned how to write the language. We are working also with this book with Miss Marie Crouch. She's coming and sitting in our group and writing everything in French, and we will be sending it to the Seminary College in Shreveport. We had an experience of a class a few years ago with a French teacher from France, and it was quite different because, our French is from the old French, from the French explorers, and one of the things, I'll give you an example of how different it is by the way of life, that we acquired the French in a sense. When it came to teach us words, she would, one example was for the car, how to get in the car. And she says, montez dans la voiture. And I said, well, that's not how we would say it. We embarquez dans le char. Embarquez because embarquer was our way of life of getting into the boats. Monte would be anything above your head. And it's like, okay. But big difference, when you try to teach the language as you have learned it. So.
Thank you. Yes?
I don't know your name. Good afternoon. I wanted to know whether or not did you ever consider obtaining an administrative license so that you perhaps can open a school that represents the linguistic landscape of the Haitian community, which involves 3 languages. As a teacher, you're empowered, but if you are an administrator, you can actually open your own charter school and have a program that preserves our 2 heritage languages as well as developing English in an academically rigorous environment. Just an idea.
Thank you, and I will take that into consideration. And I believe that many people of the community have asked me the same thing. However, you mentioned a charter school. That is correct. A charter school or a private school, it can happen. But in the public school system, it's kind of hard because yeah, yes, but definitely that's something that, you know, I'm trying to work on. And the reason why I did not go for the administrative degree prior you know, in the past is because of the politics that exists in it. I always want to go to work and get out, and don't deal with all the politics, having to deal with the government, you know, higher funding, and it's very complex. Now that things are changing, many people are realizing that the public school system is not doing the type of a good job, what they should be doing. So many people now, including the government now, are looking forward to have charter schools. And they are trying to empower people, administrators and educators, to go toward that direction. So it will be much easier to do it now. And I must say, in the community where we are, we have so many schools that were French schools, bilingual schools, that are closed. We now work, Monsieur Le Devedec was there 2 weeks ago. We have a school in Brooklyn by the name of Bethany School that was a bilingual school, a French school. 5 years ago, they closed the school due to funding. And the people there would like to reopen the school. And although I do not have my administrative license, I can still help them to reopen it, and we will be going under somebody else's license for now. But the problem of funding is always an issue. So we are trying to write a grant to see if we can make it happen. And you know, I believe if we have a start, and they also have other French schools in Park Slope. I believe they recently have a bilingual school in Park Slope. So slowly but surely, we believe that we will get there. Thanks.
There's a question, oh, 2 questions, 3 questions. We have time for several questions still.
First, thank you to the panel. I think it's absolutely fascinating what you're talking about and what you're doing, and so important. But I think, and I know there are many people here from the university and college levels, I think it's very important in our educational and our French language and Spanish and languages departments to train our teachers to be able to go into the public schools and to be able to work with heritage learners, and to train our teachers to work with the young people in special ways, that we have English as a second language, and also heritage learners that I know so many people like David had been doing to work within our public school institutions. But I think we need the teacher training, the French teacher training, or the Spanish teacher training, or your other languages to do this. But thank you very much.
Okay. Yes, of course. Mm-hmm.
So I completely agree with you, and I think in Maine, to this day, there are French teachers whose narrow focus is France, and they're not aware of the French-speaking world, and they're not aware that there are French heritage speakers, passive speakers, people of French cultural heritage right in Maine in their own state. And so there's a lot of education to be done. But in the past also, there was a whole generation of people who are now maybe in their 50s who were told by French teachers, something like Barney Barabé told me, worked on the state level, leave your French in the streets of Lewiston where it belongs. So, you know, there's just a huge, there's a lot of work to be done in French teacher training to overcome the past and also to prepare for the future. So thank you for that.
I'd like to also address that from the Louisiana perspective, and because we have such a multiple group of French speakers in Louisiana. And it's fascinating that you bring that up, because yes, absolutely it's necessary for the French teachers to be sensitized to the fact that there are diverse dialects and diverse expressions, and that it's not just say this, that word flips me, sorry. We've really had some issues with that in Louisiana, because in order to educate to teach French as a language and also to teach in French, we haven't had people in Louisiana who could do that, who were trained to do that. A phenomenal program just kicked off this year between Louisiana and France, where we are taking 10 Louisiana future educators. They are going to France. They are spending an academic year there, and they're learning to teach in French, not to teach French as a language, but to teach in French. So we're on that path to creating our own French teachers. The other, and I'll second what Julia just said, there's a fascinating thing that I think occurs, and it's just perhaps a very anecdotal observation. It seems to me that every French speaker is, in a particular way, sort of chauvinistic for his or her own variety of French. And that relationship to the language doesn't necessarily exist in that same way in English. So what we have happening in Louisiana is very much the same thing that happens in Maine or in other places where French is minority or where French has been repressed, where, you know, j'arrive comme ça et je commence à parler avec cet accent-là, et la personne va dire, bah, mais tu parles le bon français, moi je parle le français louisianais ou le français acadien. Okay? So there's that immediate distancing from the language, so that we have to somehow come up with a way to sensitize teachers to those diversities.
Fleuriot, and then we have a question in the upper middle section.
Okay, I have a question. What I would like to say is the fact that we are trying to really encourage, you know, our young folks to speak French, especially in the Haitian community. The problems that we are facing right now, they would like to know, or I would like to know what to do, because it's not just, you know, tell them to speak French, but what's in it for them? People just don't want to speak French because French has nothing to offer to them. They speak English because they know they're going to make money. They speak Creole because they want to speak to their family. Why they should speak French? Because this is the main problem. Because I myself, to really encourage a lot of, you know, young kids to come to my program, I offer them next year to take them to the NASA program. But the NASA program, I try to, you know, take them. I have to pay for them. It costs the organization a lot of money to take the kids to Orlando to pay for the program, which is a very, very, very good program. But the thing is, it's not enough. I offer them to take them to Paris. That's a trip. But, you know, just to make sure to find a way, because I myself, you know, I can say, you know, I'm very lucky. And I try my very best to speak more than French, you know, speak English, Spanish, Creole, and everything. But I have 2 kids. My kids, they want to speak Spanish. They don't want to speak French. And constantly, what I'm trying to do now is to find a way. Because last week, my wife and I, we went to our school to ask, you know, the principal and put my first child in a French, you know, course, because I would like him to speak French. But we have to be frank with ourselves, and we have to tell the truth. We don't do much really to expose the French languages. We just speak it between ourselves, inside, you know, our homes. But what we have done, right now I can tell you that I am so happy and so proud because we have a French president, Mr. Sarkozy, which is the first time actually the people really learn about French, because it's been involved in so many good things lately. But so far, we never done much. Even in Haiti, the French government always try to really support the Haitian government, give them money and everything. But the Haitian people, they don't know about it. Because the communication, for me, they don't really use the best way to communicate, to let people know what's going on, how they involve, what they have done. So let's be frank today. What are we going to do to encourage people to speak French? Thank you.
answers?
I would totally agree with you. And once again, let me give you the caveat that I don't come at all from the academic world. I come from the cultural product development world, where I'm looking at real applications for what French is. And this is a question that's really relevant in Louisiana. So we want to increase immersion schools. We want these children to learn French, but why? And we have to develop and determine and define that why. And I think it's only then, when we are creating products and we are doing projects and things like that, that we're going to get to a point where we will have our young people, once again, being not only teachers of French, but also mechanics in French and doctors in French and healthcare workers in French and all those kinds of things. I mean, all those things have to be incentivized. And I like to steal ideas from different people, and so I'm launching on a campaign with Codafil and touching each of the different articles in our new law. There are steps that have to be taken to get to what I'm determining or calling franco-durabilité. And the first thing that we have to do is franco-sensibiliser. So you have to sell your product. You have to franco-responsabiliser, which means that whoever is going to consume this product has to be responsibilized to do something with it. And then once you get to that point, you can begin to have une franco-durabilité. Take, for example, an immersion thing. If you want to have an immersion school, you have to first sell this idea not only to parents, to kids, to administrators. You've got to sell it to them. Once they buy that idea and they put that program in place, you're looking at une responsabilisation. And then when you have bilingual kids, you're producing durabilité. Well, once you get beyond that durabilité, where do they go? In Louisiana, once again, referring very specifically to what our mandates are. If we take a tourism product, for example, the first thing you have to do is know who in the tourism industry speaks French. And there are lots of them doing swamp tours, doing all those kinds of things. You get them together, they create a product. Okay, so now they're sensibilisés. Once they create that product and they have that product ready to take to a market, they're responsabilisés. And once they start to see economic benefit from that product that they've developed from being sensibilisé, responsabilisé, et là, il y a une durabilité, they're seeing economic viability to that, then you're incentivizing the use of French. So these are some of the kinds of models that we're trying to look at from the perspective of a state agency in Louisiana that's trying to look at all of these different kinds of things and why French is important. And it's the heritage aspect of it is absolutely important, but when you're looking at populations of children in schools who can't go anymore because they don't exist anymore to parents or to grandparents who speak French, what's the carrot? What's the carrot? And how do we create that carrot?
Time? 1:15, right? There was one question in the upper middle section that they've been waiting, so maybe we should take that question at least. Sorry. Yes? Did you want to ask your question? Oh, it's coming.
Hi, I have a question for the Cohesion. Actually, you gave a few answers, but I was wondering, I've been teaching for the Cohesion for 3 years, 5 years ago, and I've been noticing that your, je vous en prie, the French immersion program works pretty well from kindergarten to 6th grade, and after that it disappears. And like you said, there's nothing after 6th grade, and French doesn't speak to them anymore. So I was wondering, how do you think it's gonna French will be developing in the next years?
That's one of our issues, and the primary challenge there is that we haven't had the possibility to get teachers from, as I understand it, who are certified to teach at the high school level to continue those initiatives. There are a couple of plans on the table in different areas in the state to actually move toward having a high school level continuum for French. So we're working toward that.
if I must tell you, to be certified at the high school level, once someone has the elementary license, they just need to take 6 more credits in teaching teenagers, teaching adolescents, then it will, at the education level. So.
I'm from Louisiana. Our realities are a little bit different.
Oh, okay, sorry. All right, was trying to help. Just to answer the question that Mr. Fleuriot, by the way, c'est mon mari, that's my husband, and he had to say that our kids don't speak French. Well, I'm a French teacher, how embarrassing, but we try. Except that they prefer speaking Creole because they find it much easier. However, their goal is to be able to speak French when we travel to France. But I must say, one of the things that we have done to encourage kids, even in the community, in the Bronx community where I work, it's the French is a romantic language. So they like to say, bonjour, je t'aime. You know, those kind of things. It's the style, you know, that's what motivates them, really. And I tell them that there are 33 different countries where French is spoken. When you travel, you'll be able to speak to someone, and that make you feel good because you'll be able to help yourself to eat or what have you. I'm trying to make it fast. And other things that we can say to motivate people is that go beyond America, where there are so many books in the World Library that are mostly written in French or Russian. You know, to be able to make a good research, you need to be able to speak many different languages. So those are some of the things, besides what Mr. Fleuriot had mentioned, that we can start by saying to help kids seeing the advantage of speaking the language, and other possibilities is getting a good job, you know, elsewhere with the United Nations or other countries. Because if you're a candidate who speaks many languages, it's better for you, and you are a better candidate than someone who only speaks one language.
And the very first step to that, and I'll give myself as a perfect example, is that we have to make, if no matter what language it is that we speak, we have to make the conscious choice to speak that language to our children, and to speak that language to our children every day without fail, and to make that decision. Because to speak a language or to not speak it is a conscious choice. And if we, as speakers of a language, whether we have learned it and whether our ancestors spoke it or whatever, and we want that to continue, it's a personal responsibility that each of us has to do.
Okay. I think we have to wrap it up. I want to thank all our panelists. It's been wonderful. And I want to thank Fabrice Jomont, Jane Ross, and Benoit Le Devedec for giving me the opportunity to moderate this panel.